Hello, my darling, and welcome back to the Sorcerer's Apprentice. This is Chapter 5. The girl loosened the rope from the pier, sat down in the boat, and took the oars. Jacob grasped the rudder and steered straight for the middle of the lake. "All hands," he called. She laughed and pulled hard. She was strong, and the boat glided across the lake, straight toward the western shore. Jacob steered a fine curve so that they turned close under the cliffs and had to watch out sharply. The oar touched the water scarcely an inch away from the rock. In this way, he urged her around the entire lake, close to the shore. They circled it for a second time. She grew warm, pulled up her sleeves and unbuttoned her blouse. Her muscles were tense, and she pulled with all her might. But her eyes gleamed with pride when he praised her. Among the reeds, he had her place the oars in the boat. They lay quietly under the overhanging willows, the long branches of which built a dense shelter around them. The moon climbed above the mountains in the west and threw 100 dancing silver flecks through the leaves. The girl left her seat and nestled at his feet. She threw her braids behind her and looked up at him. "Tell me," she begged. "Tell me the fairy tale." "The fairy tale?" Jacob asked slowly. "Oh, it's a sad story." His hand rested on her head, and yet he did not feel her. He peered through the branches at the bright, quiet lake and up at the moon. He felt very secure in his lonely hiding place in the Skodra Valley, completely surrounded by mountains that reached to the heavens. They were well protected by the sky-piercing hills, and he even felt more hidden in this green grotto, far from all life. Here he was safe from all men, and no enemy could find him in this obscure corner. He was alone, not entirely alone, but who was with him? There was someone who loved him and gave his existence a calm and glad repose. Marfa the goat, or the tomcat, or even Teresa, any one of them. Each assuredly was a fragment of nature itself, so that the name of each did not even matter. He only felt it. Something was there that had life and breath, that was strange and yet his very own, belonging to him. That was what he needed, a dumb thing which he could speak to. He knew it well, this feeling that was peculiar to all men, this great yearning for confession. Pious folk have an easy time, he thought, and go to their priest, and those who are not pious choose a confessor too. They go to a mistress or a faithful friend who must hear them and absolve them. But he had neither a friend nor a mistress. Once upon a time he had a poodle, and he had related many things to this animal's large eyes. When it licked his hands, when it wagged its tail, then he felt absolved, but his poodle was dead. He stroked Teresa now as if she were a faithful dog. It seemed to him as if he were lying at home, as in the old days when he went to school. He used to lie on the soft skins in front of the fireplace in the evening twilight when there was no one in the large house except himself and the black dog. "Come, Ellie, come," Jacob would say. "It's so long since I've talked with you. Come, I have so much to tell you." The girl crouched quietly at his feet and did not move. He spoke. "You see, my good Ellie, it happened again. Do you remember how we went walking one evening last week down by the castle? Then Thekla came. No, you didn't know it. You were down in the garden chasing the ducks, always after the ducks. Yesterday, the police brought in a ticket once again, and we had to pay 10 marks because it was the 3rd time this autumn. Mother is angry and says she won't pay it, and I must get rid of you. But she will pay it in the end, and I won't get rid of you. Furthermore, what would it matter if we did get rid of you? You would just turn up again the next day. Yes, you are well off. You don't behave in the least like a well-bred dog. You ruin the flower beds and chase the ducks and tear the trousers of people who you don't like. You dirty the whole house so that we can't lay carpets on the stairs any longer. Twice a day the maids have to come and scrub the whole place on your account, and they need hours to keep you clean. You're a little pig. If I want 2 pairs of freshly polished boots a day, they grumble. But do any of them ever complain of the work that you cause them? They are proud if you condescend to enter the kitchen occasionally, or accompany one of them a few blocks on the street. Yes, beat time with your tail. I know very well that that is your way of laughing at me. Come, be good, Allie. Tell me how you succeed in making all the people kind to you. For look, no one is kind to me, no one. They all torment me. They tread on me. They strike me. Listen. So Thekla came along the moat of the old castle. I grew red and was embarrassed. I am always embarrassed. And why, dear dog? Why? Why do I always have this horrible feeling? If I want to buy a notebook, I stand at the shop window for 15 minutes and dare not go in. I am embarrassed. If there's company at home, I don't want to come out of my room. I am embarrassed. And why? Why? I weep with rage and bite my handkerchief, and it avails nothing. Thekla came. I was embarrassed, grew red. It did not greet her. Then I followed her and tried to speak to her. She walked slowly, and at the corner she waited. But I turned back and did not speak to her. I was embarrassed. At home I wrote to her, or rather, I intended to write to her, but nothing came of it. I was embarrassed to say that I was so embarrassed, so it came to pass that I wrote a poem. I copied it and sent it to her. And do you know, Allie, what she did? She gave it to her aunt, and her aunt sent it to my professor of mathematics, and he handed it to the director of the gymnasium. Now I am condemned to 2 hours imprisonment this Saturday, and they will end by telling my mother, and that is the worst part. That, you see, is what happened. Now tell me, what did I do to make them all so bad to me? Thekla did not like my poem. Why didn't she tear it up? And her aunt, why didn't she summon me? She comes to our house often enough. I would have gladly promised her to never write a poem for Thekla again. But no, she sent it to the gymnasium. If she had only given it to the professor of German or the professor of Greek, she knows them too, they would have both laughed and merely administered reproof. But no, she has to send it to that disgusting professor of mathematics. And do you know why? Because she knows very well that I have no ability in mathematics, and that the stupid fellow can't endure me. That's why. And he, of course, had to raise a great hue and cry and run to the director. And what did I do? I didn't greet Thekla, that is true, but she knows very well that I would gladly have done so, and spoken to her too, and a great deal more. And then I wrote a poem for her. Surely that's nothing bad either. I wrote it because I am fond of her, and because I wanted to beg her pardon. That was very improper, said the director. If I write poems at all, he said, there must, in the first place, be nothing about girls in them. Now I ask you, Allie, what else is there to put in a poem? I can't write her a ballad about giants and knights. What would that have to do with my not having greeted her and desiring to excuse myself? And in the second place, he said, a poem of that kind should by no means be sent to anyone. But surely all the poets send their verses to those whom they are addressed. One can't possibly let them lie around until one has enough for a book. No, I didn't do anything wicked to Thekla. All summer long I cut roses in the garden daily. Mother scolded me because they disappeared. I sent them to her by her little brother. That's what I did. She took them all, and yet she betrayed me to her aunt. And no longer than 3 weeks ago, I presented 2 of my white guinea pigs to this same old aunt when she was visiting us. I even did a kindness once to the old professor of mathematics. He lost his handkerchief on the street the other day, and I picked it up and I took it to him. Why is it then that they are all so wicked to me? Look, Allie, I am good to you, am I not? And I would like to be good to all men. But that is not possible. They all do evil to me, all of them, except those who do not know me. You may well believe me, Ellie. I don't know a single human being who doesn't do evil to me. Tell me, how must one go about it to make them kind? Jacob fell silent, and his eyes looked longingly through the branches. The girl at his feet drank in his words. She didn't understand what it was all about, but Jacob's gentle, sad voice brought tears to her eyes. She looked at him and saw his blonde locks fall over his forehead, his youthful lips half open over polished teeth. Jacob's hands rested on his knees as if they held an open book, but he gazed over it, far into the distance. He looked like a lad of 15, sitting there before her, lonely, left for dead out in the wide world. She felt like jumping up and pillowing his head against her bosom, She felt like a mother toward this poor boy. "Now I am back again," Jacob said, "once more. Come here," he motioned to Teresa. "Come close to me, my good dog. Do you know why I am so fond of coming back during the holidays? To see you, my dear old fellow. Why don't I take you along to the university like I used to do? You see, it can't be done, really not. And what is there for you out in the world? Only myself. But here you have everything, and may do everything you desire, and are master. Out in the world, you are only a simple dog. There, I have brought you a collar. Look at it. There is none more beautiful in the world. It is wrought of silver and shows Diana's hunt. It was made for a strong hound of the blonde Duchess of Ferrara. Do you know who gave this to me? A beautiful and clever woman, and it means that she will never kiss me again. Never again. Do you understand? It was this way, dear Ellie. I was in the Palazzo Borelli, as I was every night. When we awakened, I and the most beautiful woman in Pisa, the yellow lamps were still burning, and at the same time a white shimmer came in through the open door from the balcony. It is a nasty poison, the first light of the young day. It makes people bad and angry. We lay there on the broad tumbled bed. Wine stood on the table in the decanters and glasses, and tall dishes stood there with fruits and cakes, remnants of our evening meal, and many roses in glasses and vases scattered on the floor and on the pillows. But my lute hung over the golden bedpost. "Play," said the beautiful Princess Ginevra. But I was tired and did not want to play. Also, a string of the lute had been broken. The room was full of heavy air. It was as if deep shadows lay there from the fragrance of the Malmsey, from the fervent roses and the fumes of the ewers of myrrh. But her naked body and all the linen exhaled the perfume, and a sultry music swept to us from those poignant embraces that were now all dead. Her lips bled, and she said, "Sing." I took the lute and placed new strings on it, and I took the Malmaison roses and put them in her hair, and green tendrils, all of which bind all dreams. And I sang her the song of Lancelot, and I spoke, "Amor che non amato amar perdona, mi prese, se forte che cum vidi ancor, non m'abbandona." It meant the love which excuses no one's beloved from loving, which seizes me in the pleasure of this man, is strong, as you see, and it will never leave me. Then she took cherries from the dishes and wound them around her toes, and she gave me her sweet foot to kiss, and I ate the cherries and kissed her toes. One cherry for each kiss, one kiss for each cherry. She laid small blue figs on her breasts and sweet strawberries on her stomach, and I kissed her breasts and her stomach, and I ate the figs and the strawberries, and I drank the wine which she offered me in her bleeding lips. She asked me whether there was anything in the world that I loved other than Ginevra Corelli, and I said that there was nothing left in the wide world for me to love except the body of the beautiful Ginevra Corelli. Then she said that I was to swear it by the Virgin and by all the saints, and I swore to her by the Virgin and by all the saints that I loved nothing in the world except the sweet body of Ginevra Corelli. And as I thought back, it really was true that I loved nothing in the world except this woman. Nothing. Nothing at all except you, my black pet. I laughed and told the princess that there was one thing that I loved, my black poodle at home by the Rhine. She drew herself up, and the poisonous light of the early day glinted in her eyes. They grew green and bitterly angry and cruel, and she said that I must go home that very day and kill my dog. I must kill you, she said. I refused. Then she wept and lamented. She lay upon my neck and begged me to kill you, and she tore herself away and said that she would go and do the deed herself. But my senses were drunk from that night and from all her love and all the ardent fragrance, and I cried out that she must kill me first before she could kill my beloved dog. She struck me and reproached me and cried out that I did not love her. I knew very well that I only needed to say one word, needed only to say that I would, and she would have forgotten it all by the evening. But I could not say it. I could not even name the act that she desired. She raged, and her cry pierced my ears. Oh, I could just as well have murdered her, since she would not desist from tormenting me. Then I took a long dagger which lay on the table. I pressed its handle into her grasp and offered her my breast. Let her stab me, I cried. Then she could kill my dog too, for he would probably die of grief if I were not to come home any more. The Princess Ginevra lifted her arm once, twice. She lifted her arm against my chest, and again she lifted it for a third time against her own breast. But she did not stab. She laughed, as one may laugh, perhaps, who has slain his mother. She sprang up from the bed and went to a cupboard. She brought out a casket which held her jewels and took out the silver collar. She threw it to me like one tosses bread to a beggar. Here, she said, here, boy, take this to your dog. And again the naked Princess Ginevra laughed, turned away, and casting no glance behind her, strode from the room. Here, Allie, my black poodle, here is your collar. Wear it, my dear animal. Tears cling to it, my tears. And you love me, for I loved this beautiful woman. I do not know how other men love, but it seems that no one ever loved her better than I did. I made a temple of her body, and she drove me away. Now I am at home again, at home with you. Are you going to console me? Do you know it is well to suffer a great pain 'cause it makes one forget all the little things." Jacob laughed. "What I say is not true. You never forget, neither the greatest nor the smallest pain. They all come back, surface back up in some hour, in endless succession, all of the torments and hurts. Only the joys disappear in the blink of an eye, but the pain remains. The human soul is a golden grail with brilliant jewels, but black worms crawl inside. They eat us up, you and me and every other human, those who do not have a soul. I don't know if you have a soul, and I hope you don't have one, my poor child, but some bad devil gave me one, and now I have to run around with it my entire life. Allie, my black poodle, had a soul too, and his soul loved my soul. Now he is dead, and his poor soul is flitting around the world, and I am seeking it, but I never find it. I don't know, perhaps it too died when my dog died. Perhaps the worms in my garden are feeding on it, just as they are feeding on his body. Shall I tell you how he died? Once upon a time, I was at home, again at home. We went out by the old castle along the moat. A carriage came along, and in it sat a good friend of mine. He stopped and we talked together. But my poodle had an aversion to the carriage and the horses because, years before, the coachman had struck him with his whip. When we shook hands and said farewell to each other, I begged my friend to wait a moment. I wanted to take the dog by the leash, but he laughed and beckoned to the coachman and drove on. Then the poodle wildly charged the horses and barked at them. One of them stepped on him. He fell, and the carriage rolled over him. There he lay and raised himself on his forelegs. His spine was broken, and he tried to drag his body along and looked at me. I raised him up and carried him home in my arms, half an hour's walk. The physician came and examined him and shook his head. He lay in my arms on the soft skins by the hearth where he had lain so often. He did not complain. He did not lament. He looked at me and licked away the tears that fell on my hands. And that was how he died. I dug him a grave in my mother's garden. A great yucca grows upon it now. Sometimes I fancy that it grows deep down with 3 long roots. 2 penetrate the hollows of his eyes, but the 3rd derives strength from his heart. And the powerful roots suck and drain, and my dead friend grows ever smaller and ever humbler, and the great yucca ever mightier and lovelier and more splendid. And its strong staff rings with 100 white chalice bells. And then I fancy that the tree is my friend, but I cannot speak with her. The yucca is blind and evil, as all beings are that are blind. They have no soul. No, the yucca is not my beloved poodle. It devoured him while he lay dead in his grave. Do you see, little girl? It looks so splendid and yet is so evil. Teresa saw how Jacob's eyes gleamed. His lips contracted painfully, yet with a certain lofty yearning, and it seemed to her as if he held a half-opened crimson rose between his teeth. His arms rose gently, as if to grasp something, some great demon that was growing in the young man's soul. But he wanted to grasp it and shape it and kiss it into life. And the girl thought that she would be happy if she could be a little speck of dust in the great whirl of those dreams. He remained that way for a long time, did not speak a word and did not move, but the flame burned in his eyes, and it seemed as if it burned deep in his breast. His cheeks grew pale and thin, and the girl fancied that she could see the hard bones through his skin. But the rose dropped from his teeth and fell down like a great drop of blood. Fearfully she looked away and hid her head upon his knees. She felt his fingers resting upon her hair. Then Jacob said, "Allie, my dear dog, I have come back. After many years, I have come back. Lie down with me on the white furs. Do you see the fire in the chimney? Wait, I will throw logs on the fire. The fire devours and is insatiable. But give it more and more to eat, and it can live eternally. Such a fire burns somewhere in my brain. It is insatiable. Over the years I have been in many lands. I am a renegade, you know, and have escaped from every camp. It was always good in the beginning, and I believed in each new flag. But there were none that did not flutter in the air for some lie. Therefore I broke my oaths, rather than becoming a perjurer against myself. That is everything to me. I drank with many companions and kissed many women. But the women were harlots, and the companions wretched scoundrels. They took my money and ate my bread, drank my wine, and poured poison into my cup. I sat at the feet of wise men, and their wisdom was a lie. I rode into the field with merry knights, and their courage was a lie. I dug in the earth with sun-bronzed peasants, and their industry was a lie. I partied at night with painters and poets, and their art was the most impudent lie of them all. My hand grew hard from the clasp of 1,000 hands, and my lips were wounded by 1,000 kisses. Yet each kiss and each hand clasp was only a lie in the end. Every day and every poor night the lies came. The lies even crept into my dreams. I waded in a swamp of crimson lies, and there was no firm ground anywhere. Wherever I set my feet, they broke through the crust, and I sank deeper at every step. When I went toward the evening, I became stuck in the slime. When I went toward the morning, I stuck in the moorland. I sank everywhere, and there was no path anywhere that led out. Then, when it became dark, I clung to a tree dedicated to me by myself. there was a scrap of land, and the alder stood upon it, and round about me was the marsh. So I clung to the tree and I listened. But something sat in the branches and sang. And I understood that there were only two things, and that one was me. But everything else was that which I was not. And all other things were just this one thing, and not 1,000 things like before. Just one large thing, and one smaller than the other, which was I myself. But a voice sang out from the branches. We live in high joy without enemies in a hostile world. We live without enmity under the hostility of hostile men. We live in a high delight, peaceful in a world of enmity. We live in peace among men that are filled with enmity. We live in high delight, hail among the sick. We dwell among the sick without sickness. We live in high delight without desire, among those who desire much. Among desirous men we live without desires. We live in high delight, we that possess nothing. Joy is our food, as it is that of the radiant gods. I listened to the sweet words, and I felt clearly that this other thing, which was not I, did not exist at all, that it was the nothingness. Therefore, there was only one thing in the world that existed. I existed. And outside of me were the nothingness and the super-nothingness. And again it sang through the dark night. Yet it was not another that sang, but my own heart that had become a lute like the heart of Israfel, the angel. My heart was a lute, and it sang, and it was a clear light and glowed into the night. And it was a red wound, and one of the sweet rapture bled the great sacrifice. And this is what the lute sang. Where there is light inexhaustible, to the world where the sun sets, carry me there as a flame. Into the imperishable world of immortality, a drop of your own blood. There where all things move after delight, there in the threefold firmament, in the heavens threefold heaven, where the worlds of light are. Let me be there eternally, a drop of your own blood, where desire and delight are, and the roseate heavens expanse, and the food and splendor of the gods. Let me be there eternally, a drop of your own blood, where joy and rapture, gratification and delight await us, where the desires of the one desire are attained. Let me be there eternally, a drop of your own blood. Thus sang the lute, which was my heart, and then I felt myself dissolve, for I floated in the first wave of blessedness. There was no more contradiction between the I and the not I. I became one with the nothingness. The nothingness was the Godhead, and I was the nothingness, and in the Godhead. Then, for the first time, I felt the nearness of God, and it was the nothingness into which I melted. The Spirit of God touched mine and conceived in me a child of the ages. For this is the nature of God, that, through all eternities, it will beget the Son, The splendor of God moved, and from out of sacred springs came the second wave. And as a drop evaporates upon a sun-heated stone, those two mighty ones, space and time, passed into nothingness. There was no past. There was no future. There was only one thing. This moment. All happening sank into this huge moment. And the moment grew and embraced all times and all space. It became one flame and one tone, one wound. And the flame sang the song, and the tone dripped the blood, and the red wound flared to heaven. Then out of the Godhead of nothingness arose the third wave, which was the great light. Then the light arose and all things floated. There was just one radiance everywhere. It cannot be expressed, that which was, for no one who ever saw it can describe this nothingness, which is the eternal being of the Godhead. Everything is light and radiance where the third wave is, and is glorious beyond all measure. And yet it is only a wretched thing compared to the last wave, for the last wave is God himself. Not a melting into him, no, him growing into you, and you becoming God. And whoever fills this, he is God. But I saw how it came, nearer and nearer, outside of me and into me, and unto me from all sides. And I felt near to the breath of the highest wave. Then many legions of gigantic glowing worms came forth out of the swamp. They burst forth and drew near, uncountable as the eternities, red hot lies, and everything collapsed, and the radiance scattered, and everything sank into a horrible darkness, even the fiery worms. Thus the great moment died before it was completed. The rope by which I was suspended broke, and I lay upon the ground on the damp earth under the alder tree. The red lies of the world had gnawed through the sacred rope, and perfection and all redemption died. And once again there were two hard things which repelled each other, I and the other. Everything was as it had once been, and I was more wretched than I had been, now that I had seen all the heavens open wide. I had seen, oh, only seen, for the red lies had devoured the last, the most sacred wave. Then a great hatred grew in me. I sprang up and grasped the horse that grazed by my side. I mounted the heavy black horse and rode forward. Behind me, however, and ready to serve me, rode 4 mighty knights. The first bore a crown and the bow of victory, and rode a white horse. The second carried a sword and rode a red horse. He destroyed all peace. The third carried a balance, the balance of severity. It was he who rode upon a black horse. But the fourth was death, and he rode a pale horse, and hell flew in his cloak. Thus we rode, and 20 hard hoofs stamped on the naked bodies of the dead. The 4 horsemen were silent, but I laughed aloud into the somber night. That was my dream, yet it was only of life that I dreamed. But when I awoke, I greedily devoured all that was evil, and I saw all that which health gave forth was great and fair, even as fair as that which issued from heaven. Only that which the earth gave was neither good nor evil. It was ugly and insignificant. But I was only a human being. I remained too unclean for the bread of heaven, and yet too weak for the hot blood of hell. And I went and ate the food of men and lived their life and did their deeds. And everything that I did was rotten and decayed, and my breath stank of carrion. Then I fled once more into the silent hell, and was alone with my own soul for 3 days and for 3 nights, and I lay sick and torn and burnt in the poisonous rottenness. Then I vomited forth all of my disgust, and then, you see, I grew to be very healthy. Now I am free. All love has died, and all good hatred, and there is nothing more for me in the entire world. Nothing else. Only you, my pet, are still alive. A weary dream out of a dead time. Like a shadow it flits past me, swift as a wind, once every 100 years. Now I am free. All chains have fallen, and all roses, and I go on my way strong and secure. A good armor lies around my heart, and the fire must burn strongly, that is, to melt it. The rats have fled, and I am proof against everything. I have peace and great quietude. This is the last thing that a man may achieve, and I have it, for I am free. And only rarely, does slain desire raise its wounded head. I let it speak and sing, and I think that it is speaking to a stranger, to one who is long dead, but not to me. It is a strange song which I scarcely understand any longer, only it makes me sad. Allie, you are my dear friend. You are my soul and my yearning. You are that which remains to me of all my slain happiness. Come, give me your paw, and let me stroke your black locks, my old friend. Are you cold? I will throw new logs upon the fire. Believe me, it was a bitter struggle, but none slew me. And here I sit, and my eyes fly through the distance. Only the old wounds bleed and burn. Jacob's voice died. His lips were set closely and tightly. The girl looked up at him, and he seemed taller and far older. He sat very erect, his head thrown back, his eyes peering sharply straight ahead. His face was pale, and his features bitter and hard. She was frightened, and it seemed to her as if he were holding a naked sword with both hands upon his knees. Then she saw how his lips twitched, and she saw how his eyes grew dim, and how 2 tears stole slowly over his hollow cheeks. They dropped down, and it seemed to her as if they leapt as sharply as glowing needles into her heart. She sobbed aloud, grasped Jacob's hand, and buried her head in his lap, and gently and softly, like a faithful dog, she licked his hand. He marked it well. Jacob trembled and wanted to withdraw his hand, but it seemed so dear and sweet. Nothing seemed as beautiful as this gentle caress of days long past. "Allie, my old friend," he whispered, "my dear, dear girl." He raised her up and caressed her cheeks. "You are very good," Jacob said. He looked at her in the eyes and saw that she had been weeping. "But why do you weep for me? It is true. One should not tell such sad stories. I will sing, that is much better. Give me the lute." He kissed her gently, and then he had her row out from among the willows, far into the lake and into the moonlight. He beckoned her to draw in the oars. Then he sang out into the blue night, half aloud, dreamily, songs of yearning, songs of the girl he loved. He sang for her, and she knew it well. A gentle wind carried them across the lake. Jacob sang and looked at her and saw that she was happy. Her face, which had just been illuminated by the full moon, suddenly passed into shadow, while her outstretched, folded hands gleamed in the bright light. In the next moment, her face was illuminated again, but the shadow that had fallen on her now flitted over Jacob, left the boat, darted across the water, and then remained lying in all its length and breadth, almost in the middle of the lake. Jacob looked up in astonishment. The moon hung over the ridge to the north. Its light fell diagonally on the lake, across the steep, overhanging, which bore 3 crosses. "It is the shadow of the image of Christ," Jacob thought, but he was mistaken. The crosses stood close to the mountain wall, and had long since sunk deep into shadow. Then the girl grasped his arm and pointed with her hand. "There, there," she whispered. "Look over there." Jacob followed her gaze and saw, close by the outermost edge, a strange figure. It seemed black, and its outline was sharply defined against the wall. It remained standing for a moment, and then glided onward, always along the extreme edge, silently, step by step. "Row over there," Jacob commanded. The girl grasped the oars mechanically, accustomed to obey his word, but her arms refused their service and trembled with fear. Jacob pushed her away and took the oars himself. She crouched before him, clasping his knees. With swift strokes he propelled the boat forward, seeking, as much as possible, to avoid making any noise. "It's the American," Teresa whispered. Jacob turned the boat and looked up. Yes, it was Mr. Peter. He stood near the abyss with wide, open eyes. His lips moved, his arms rose and fell. It looked as though he were making an address. His face was stony, immobile, and not a word issued from his mouth. Jacob felt the girl nestle close to him. She quivered with fear, moaned and sobbed. He saw her lips open, as if to utter a cry of fear. Swiftly, he closed her mouth with his hand. "You must be still," he whispered. Don't you see that he is walking in his sleep? You will awaken him, and he will fall to his death." But it was too late. The cry was wrung from her breast in piercing torment, and resounded in the valley on all sides. Liberated and relieved, yet frightened by her own action, she pressed herself still closer to him and fastened her teeth into his coat. The American did not move. His ears, alive only to inner voices, had heard nothing of her cry. He stood rigid, preaching violently, and then he knelt down and prayed, fervently with outstretched arms. Finally he arose, went back across the ledge and down the broad path. Jacob followed him with his eyes until he disappeared behind the bushes. Silently he rowed back, tied the boat fast, and carried the girl, who clung heavily to him, into the house. And that, my darling, ends chapter 5. Thank you for listening. I'll see you soon for the next part of this. Have sweet and creepy dreams.